Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Have a Nice Life Money and Career podcast for the rest of us. We are here helping you so you can figure out your life without having to love the systems that made it so damn hard in the first place. My name is Hadassah Damien. I'm a money coach and design strategist, and I am here with the effervescent
Pippi Kessler, a career
Ooh.
coach, organizational psychologist, and leadership coach. And this podcast that you're listening to is based on a workbook by the same name. If you want to, if you're somebody who likes to be looking at something, you can follow along in the workbook. Or if you're somebody who prefers to just listen to something, you can just listen through the podcast, do whatever's best for your brain. We're going to take you through a series of exercises that use design thinking to help you figure out what you want and need for your career and finances, and hopefully to help you do it in a way that makes you feel less ashamed and less overwhelmed. In this series, we're going to talk about stuff that a lot of other career and financial advice leaves out. Stuff like trauma, privilege, capitalism, systemic barriers, and other factors. And when we talk about it, we're not just going to pressure you to believe in yourself. We're going to focus on tactical steps that you can take and exercises that you can do to make it easier to figure out what to do next.
That's right. In our last two episodes, we gave some context on who we are and why we're making this now, and also some context on the historical water we're swimming in, some of the situational, unchangeable factors. So go back and listen to those if you want more ground beneath you, please.
In this episode, we're going to walk you through a framework for getting unstuck. Both of us have something in common in our work, even though I work more on career stuff and Hadassah works more on financial stuff. We both use a tool called design thinking in our work. We're going to explain more about what that is, how it can help, how to do it differently than how sometimes super oppressive corporate workshop people do it. Both of us often find that it's very comforting to us to have a plan for figuring out how we're going to go about working on tough problems. And that's what this episode's all about. We're going to go over each step for what our plan is for how to figure out your money and career stuff. And we're going to explain how each step works.
So, yes, we use this method a lot in our professional lives, but why are we making you use it? Here's what we think is useful for you to know. Design thinking method. It's made for moments of great uncertainty, which is absolutely what it's like when you're trying to think about potential big changes to how you work, how you relate to work, what you're doing. Number two, it makes you define and understand context, values, and desires as specifically as possible. And in both of our experience, the more specific you can get and naming things, calling them out, doodling them, writing them down, however you articulate it, it just helps you understand better, right? So it really forces deeper understanding. It also, number three, simplifies and forces small decisions and helps you understand the stake of those decisions. So rather than having to rip the band-aid off and quit your job and jump in the net will catch you, no, we're actually going to have you do little tiny micro experiments and decisions, and you understand the stakes of what's going to happen. So we're not going to encourage you to do anything that might feel unsafe. It might be uncomfortable, but we want you to do small decisions. And so, yeah, number four, design thinking embraces experiments and actually trying things out. So getting out of your head and going into the world where you would experience things if you were to make these bigger decisions. And number five, it centers learning. Man, one of the great things about life is that it is actually an adventure of learning. And you're going to keep learning forever because there's always going to be more information. There's going to be more things that are available. You're going to keep growing. The world will keep changing. There's always going to be more to learn. But you can't get stuck in that. You don't want to be stuck just in the wave of information coming at you. You want to make sense of it and then do something with it, right? So it centers learning, but using what you're learning to make small and useful decisions on the short term.
There's lots and lots of people who really love design thinking, but it's probably not a cult because you can't give it all your money and you can't live in it. It's not a place you can go and it's not an organization. It's like a set of approaches. What's relevant to you about it is that you can use it to figure out how to live and how to do complex problem solving that seems particularly hard because at its core, what design thinking is asking you to do is to be willing to embrace that you don't know the answer and then try to go get information about it. Try to let an imperfect concept form. Try things out related to that concept or guess that you're having, and then apply what you're learning to improve what you're thinking about what's happening.
But some people do think that design thinking is a cult because it is frequently used by highly enthusiastic white men speaking corporate lingo, some of whom are my friends, to be honest. But it can show up in like high pressure workshops. And I think that misses the forest for the trees. To me, this methodology is really great for emergent learning. And as we're discovering about ourselves, discovering ways to put together a path that really makes sense to you, you're going to be layering things that you're figuring out on top of other things. You're emerging in your understanding. And because we're going to be, like Pippi said, okay with not knowing the answer, layering new things on, not being perfect, not being immediately right or done, we're really resisting patriarchal and like colonizer logic. Okay, we are asking questions. It is okay to fail because life is, in fact, just a series of failures and we're evolving, right? And so that's something that I want us to hold is that we're not out here to march in a straight line towards the right answer. We're here to do a process of small, mediated, bite-sized discovery.
Yeah, so what Hadassah's getting at is that one of the things that's a bummer is that design thinking is actually particularly well suited to radical imagining because it is resisting this really oppressive thing about that you have to know everything and that there's like this one like objective truth that some guy knows and you don't know it. It's totally coming at it from another side, which is about the wisdom of every person to discover and know. And it's a bummer that radical capacity of design thinking has been blocked by the way that it's commonly used, which is product design. So it's used a lot for product design and it's used a lot by corporate people. And that means that it's less familiar a lot of times to people who don't live in those fields. And a lot of the language sounds gross or off. So the first time I ever went to a design thinking workshop, I was like, triggered. And I don't usually do this, but I got so mad at the workshop leader who was speaking in all this corporate speak. It was supposed to be a workshop for organizers, but the person who was leading the workshop was using all this corporate language. And I got really mad. I was like, this is a conspiracy. You're trying to get us to all be corporate drones. Like, I really hated it. So I thought I hated design thinking. It was like a whole decade later that I was able to look at it again and see the flexible potential of the tools. But I just wanted to comment to that. I did not like this the first time that I learned about it because I was worried that it was a conspiracy run by corporations. Anyway, we're going to try to teach you design thinking tools in a way that you can use them in your own voice and in your own style.
I love that story. Kind of in contrast, the first time that I started exploring design thinking, I was literally applying for a job that said design thinking facilitator. I didn't know it was like capital D, capital T. I was just like thinking in a designy way. Yeah, that's got to be cool. And then I Googled it and it was like there's a whole universe within it. But as I started looking into what it meant and watching some videos, I just had major light bulbs going off because I was like, oh, this is just a way of describing what I and my organizer and artist and like social movement and nonprofit friends have been doing forever, which is trying to understand, empathizing, getting more information, right? Like coming up with an idea, going out and getting some feedback or trying some things, like working in a cycle. And I was like, oh, there's business words for this. Great. Let me learn the business words. And then I was off. I loved it. But so I just outlined some of the basic steps in the capital D, capital T world. But listener, I want to tell you what the steps we are going to give you are. There's 8 steps. We've already started with one of them with our last episode. This is for gnarly problems that you're trying to untangle. So start with a challenge that matters to you to solve. And step 2 is understand the context. What's true? What's around this thing? Step 3, set criteria that matter to you. Step 4, research and expand your ideas, learn a lot, understand more. Step 5, take all of that stuff and start to weave it together into like baby's first basket. Like, what's a first version of how all this stuff fits together? And then step 6, go try some stuff. Does this basket hold water? Which parts leak? Step 7, revise what you're thinking about, revise your idea based on what you've learned. And then take that information, make a decision about it, actually come to a bigger to-do. And then later review and repeat if the challenge comes back, which is basically what life is like. So I want to go into each of those more, but I wanted to give you the 1-minute version. What are the steps we're going to walk you through? So step 1, understand the context. Take time to situate your struggle in the current moment. It's true that history repeats itself, but it's also true that history evolves, right? Conditions change. Your life and your needs change. What's happening right now? Accept the challenge, right? Are you really going to go into working on your life and money stuff? And if you're listening, if you're reading along, you're probably somewhere in here. But are you going to commit to actually accepting the challenge and working on it? Is it something you want to get into? This is not just a listening experiment. We're actually going to ask you to think about things, research things, take notes, reflect. There's going to be other actual work to do to come out with this. So do you want to do that? Is it time? Then we get into it, right? Step 3, set criteria. And criteria is it's a concept for defining what a good outcome is. So what's the shape of the thing that you're trying to live into? So is a good outcome one where you have a lot of free time? Then you have some criteria about how much time you can and don't want to work. Is a good outcome one in which you're living in harmony with your physical needs? Okay, then you're going to have some criteria about the physicality of how you do and don't want to experience your work life. Is a good outcome one where you live by the ocean or with your best friend? Okay, great. Then you're going to have some criteria about the types of jobs that maybe allow you to be remote or be seaside, right? Or are happening seaside, or that you can do hip by hip with your bestie. Your definition of a good life and what you want and what you need and what that looks like to you, it is different for every single person. So the criteria are ones that you're going to have to come up with and understand. But they're going to help you know how much money you need, how much time to work, what your preferences are, what your values are. And this is a place where it's actually really going to make sense for you to put a fair amount of time and thinking in to actually, again, to build the shape of the thing that you want from the outside. Step 4, expand ideas and do research. So first we have you think about the context and then, yes, do I want to do this? And then what are my criteria? And then go do some research. So you're a little bit more targeted. You're not just Googling stuff at 1 a.m. when you're panicked, right? What are your ideas? And what more do you need to know about them? Is it different types of industries? Is it what does self-employment look like? Is it what does it actually cost to live here versus there? If you've ever been in a really good brainstorming session, you know how awesome it can be to do some research and expand your ideas, right? To start to bubble some stuff and then go figure out if it's completely too far off the wall or brainstorming, it takes you from having a few options to many. It can help you feel more abundant. It can also increase the odds that you're going to find new solutions that you like better, or think a little bit more expansively. Seeing what's happening out in the world. There's new jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? What's out there? You don't know until you go look. Research is how we find out which of our options or which of our kind of nascent ideas has some legs beneath it and which should maybe not be pursued further. Next step, you're going to make, what did I say? Baby's first basket. You're going to make a fuzzy first draft concept. You're going to make some guesses about what to try. Your research, your criteria, they're going to help you whittle down your brainstorms into a smaller list of ideas that you think has potential. So it might be like, okay, I'm going to be a dog walker to the stars, or maybe I'm going to have a walking fitness podcast, or maybe I'm going to just be a podcast producer. I don't know. Okay. You might have come up with these set of ideas based on some of your research, based on some of your criteria. You love walking, you love podcasting, might be some of those. I don't know. And okay, great. So how can you specify what those things are? What are the actual little concepts? So you're not just looking at a list that says dogs, walking, podcasts, editing, sitting down, Los Angeles. How do you put those things together? You have to make a little actual idea. Step 6, try things out and learn. Like I said a little bit ago, we're not going to encourage you to rip the Band-Aid off your life unless you're truly driven to do so, in which case that's what you should do. Most people, though, I think it makes more sense to try little things out and test out or prototype little pieces in ways that are safe. So maybe you temporarily join like a dog walking service super part-time to see if you even like it. Maybe you make a podcast with your friend just to see what it actually takes and to try to figure out how do people even get paid for this thing. One of the most helpful concepts from design thinking is this idea that you can prototype ideas before jumping in all the way. What's the little mini piece that you can do? Before building a huge building, maybe you make a little model, right? You're going to be looking out ways to try out potential features that are inexpensive, that are reversible, and that give you more information while keeping you safe. When you do that, when you get out there, talk to people, do some stuff, you're going to learn information you can't get otherwise. Like you just can't, there's a limit to what research will give you. At some point, you got to get out there, whatever that looks like for you, and get experiential information. So you're going to learn stuff, and then you're going to come back to your idea and be like, you know what? I hate podcasting. I absolutely despise it. It is coming off my list for whatever reason that came to you when you were actually trying to do it. Maybe you were just like full tilt dead set on moving to Miami. And then you visit for a weekend and you realize, oh my God, this is the muggiest, moistest, most schwitzy I've ever been in my entire life. And I can't wait to leave. And I have a heat rash. And now I have a lot more information about how I am not moving to Miami after all. And then you're going to go try another thing, maybe a bigger thing. You're like, what's another awesome city that fits some of these criteria? It'll give you even more information. It'll scoot you a little bit closer to an idea that makes more sense to you. And that should lead you to be able to put it all together again and make a bigger for now decision. And there's research that indicates that when we tell ourselves we're making a decision, we're bringing our brain to some peace because the part of our brain that's like kind of percolating this on the background can go to rest. But it is also true that this is a for now decision. You might change your career or your work world again in 5 years or 10 years or 1 year. But giving yourself the peace of your for now decision lets you dive into it and dig into it. So this is the stage where you're committing to a decision and resting in assurance that you did your research, you made your best guess, you have an informed decision. Once people make a decision, there's happiness in that. You can move forward into enjoying it rather than rehashing it. But step 8, you might at some point want to rehash or want to revise or do things a little bit differently. And that's okay. You will come to the next stage in your life. And it's okay to come back and make your decision again. Again, we're not being perfectionist. There is no straight line that any of us have to march along in life. It's just like that. So as you go through the exercises in the workbook, in the chapters, and in the podcast, we'll give you some verbal exercises. We're going to give you lots of stories and support and explainers. And we'll describe each step in greater detail and give you more examples to help you move through that phase. But don't worry, friends, it's not all intellectual noggin work. Pippi, what else should folks expect?
For each of these stages, there's going to be some activities that you'll do or homework that you'll do to get through it. But each of these stages also can bring out certain feelings. And so we just wanted to also preview what some of the emotions might be and what the emotional ride can be going through these steps. And also give you some ideas about things that you can do to get through each part. The first step that Hadassah was talking about is that you have to make this decision like, okay, I'm going to try to work on this. I'm going to try to work on my money stuff, or I'm going to try to figure out what my career should be. And in order to do that, either you need gumption, like this kind of, let's do it, like this kind of motivation to get started, or you just need to feel fed up enough that you're ready for a change. Change can start either because changing starts to feel a little easier or because staying the same starts to feel a little harder, and both of those are valid. What we're going to be encouraging you to talk to like the self-talk we're going to be encouraging you to try out during this stage is things like, let's give this a try and see if my life can get better and easier and more fun. I'm not going to know if I try. So that's like the gumption self-talk. Or you could also try the I'm fed up self-talk, which sounds like, I don't have to know where I'm headed. I just know that I don't want to stay like this. Let's get the fuck out of here, So either one of those kinds of self-talk can be helpful at that phase. The next step is that you're going to be setting criteria and brainstorming that criteria. And the emotional state that you're going to need to do that is the courage to explore. And as we were talking about before, when we were talking about internalized depression, sometimes our brains try to stop us from brainstorming because our brain is afraid that if we really want something, but we don't know how we're going to get it, we're going to be humiliated or disappointed. So what we're going to be encouraging you to do at that time is to try self-talk like, I don't have to know how I'm going to make this happen. I just need to focus on figuring out what I want. So the self-talk at that time is about trying to get around your brain trying to prevent you from getting disappointed by preventing you from working on it at all. And that's part of what the emotional task is. The next step is that after you brainstorm, you're going to make this like fuzzy first draft concept and you're going to start making guesses about what you want to try. And the emotional skill that you're going to need at that phase is being willing to be at 80% sure, like thinking it's a pretty good idea and start anyway. There are times in life when it's really important that every single detail is perfect. If you're a NASA engineer and you're in charge of checking the safety of a spaceship, I want you to do a perfect job. I want you to check 100% of the things on the checklist you have to check. But if we're talking about career development and we're getting ready to prototype something for career development, it's actually the opposite skill. We want to stay loose and not spend too much time perfecting an idea before we've gotten to test out if we even like it at all. Like the example that Hadassah was giving about moving to Miami, we don't want you to have found the perfect house in Miami and have spent like 1 million hours getting this perfect job and I've gotten an entire wardrobe for exactly that weather before you just drive over there for a day. So this is the opposite of the NASA person. Like we want you to just be like loose, trying things before you're totally sure. And the self-talk you can try at that stage is things like, okay, all I need to do right now is just make a guess. I don't have to know for sure. Or close enough is good enough. Let's try it. What you're going to do next is that you're going to be revising and prototyping. So you're going to be trying these experiments and then trying to learn something and revise based on what you're learning. And in order to do that, the emotional tool that you're going to need is the courage to try things and be wrong. And the image, like the role model who helps me at this stage is the scientist, because when scientists run experiments, what they want the most is the truth. If you were a scientist and you were testing something like, okay, if I put an orange on my head, does it heal a cold? If you were doing an experiment about that, you're ideally trying to actually answer that question for real. If your main goal in setting the experiment up was to set it up so that the answer was going to be yes, you're not doing science, you're a scammer. The heart of the scientist's hypothesis, just another word for it, the scientist's guess, is that it has to be falsifiable. And what that means is that a scientist's hypothesis, a scientist's guess, has to be set up so that it's a real option that they could be proven wrong as well as right. That's why it's such a big deal when, I don't know, like soda companies pay for for a study of soda or something like that, because they are trying to maybe make it come out in a way that advantages them. And that's why everyone gets so pissed about that. If you were a scientist and you were studying putting an orange on your head to see if it heals a cold, and you found that it does not heal a cold, the experiment was a success because you got an answer and not a failure because you got a no. So at this stage, you can try self-talk, like saying to yourself, the outcome I want the most is the truth. Or, I'm a scientist. If I get an answer, I succeeded. Or you can try doing a little chant like, yes is not success. No doesn't blow. Give me the truth or give me death. So you can try different things. They're like basically encouraging you about the valor of getting things wrong. The next thing, though, that you're going to have to do is that based on the experiments and what happens, you're going to have to make a bigger for now decision. And this is a big deal because if you've ever known somebody who isn't willing to do this step, they get really stuck. So if you're going to get through this really crucial step, you're going to have openness to try a new way of being. Whenever you make a decision, even if you're deciding to stay put, you're choosing to exit the mode of discernment and move into the space of enjoying your decision. So even if you decide to keep everything the same, you're making a change. And in order to do that, we have to open up to being in this new phase. If you grew up in Miami, as opposed to someone considering moving to Miami, and you were considering deciding to move to like rural Vermont, you're going to have the most fun doing that if you're open to experimenting with this new snowy lifestyle and trying things maybe you've never done before, wearing big mittens. So at this stage, you might want to try saying things to yourself like, let's give this a good try, or I'm going to do everything I can to make this change really easy on me. Or saying to yourself, hey, I'm still me. I'm just learning about new facets of myself in a new part of my life. And you also might want to comfort yourself if you're having a hard time adjusting. So you could say, it's okay if it takes me a while to get used to this. I just might need extra rest and support while I adjust. And what's going to happen after that is that based on how that goes, that decision you made, you're going to revise. And in order to do that, the emotional tool you're going to need is discernment to know when it's time to change again. Let me tell you, I am somebody who will stay for years and years in a bad situation. And part of how I know how far on that spectrum I am is that one of my closest friends is someone who's at the other end of that spectrum. He will split fast in a lot of different contexts if there's a dissatisfaction. And over the years, we had this running joke that between the two of us, there's one person with good discernment about when to leave. Like, by our powers combined, we are about right about staying a little bit, but not too long. So if you're somebody who tends to stay too long, like me, one thing you can do to help yourself is to pick really clear indicators in advance about when you're going to reevaluate or leave. So it could be something like you decide to take a job, but you say to yourself, and you can even write this down on a piece of paper or give it to a friend and be like, give me this paper in 6 months. If I've been unhappy at this job every day for a month, I'm going to reevaluate. It's like a promise that you're making to yourself that you're not just going to tolerate it indefinitely. Or another example of this would be something like having a rule. If I do a gig for someone that's worse than a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10 to work with, worse than 5 on that scale, I won't take gigs with them anymore. So having something that automatically triggers a reevaluation or a change On the flip side, if you're more like my friend, you might want to plan ahead some tools you're going to try before leaving to help you tolerate the discomfort of acclimating or not missing out on things that could have improved a situation or helped it get better. So you might write down a list. These are the things I'm going to try before I leave. You might want to try saying to yourself self-talk like, if you're more like me, you might want to try to say, I promise myself I'll take an action if I start to see evidence that this situation isn't good for me. And if you're more like my friend, you might want to try self-talk. Okay, before I bail, I'm going to try some different things to see if I can get more of what I need here.
Friend, fellow adventurer, are you ready to get started? The rest of this series and our workbook is structured to take you through these steps, supporting you with some analysis tools as well as emotional tools, and enable you to do the work of figuring out your work without having to love wage labor, without having to ignore your capitalism trauma, and with hopefully the tools you need to feel like it's possible to make some choices and try them on. So the question for you to move forward, do you accept the challenge? Are you ready? If so, grab something to doodle with, figure out something to take notes on, have a little device to voice note on, whatever you like to do, and you can on to the next part of the series.
Yeah, the next chapter in the series, the next episode is about picking criteria and identifying what you need, which is something that both of us really love because it's really exciting to find out what it is that you really want. So come back for the next episode and we'll start picking criteria.